Welcome to PolyCast, a Civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
Dan Q.
Makalua.
The Me and Team.
Mad Jin. With guest co-host
Mega Bears fan.
We'll just pause here for a second because I don't think the live stream picked that up. Okay.
Well, you're not going to get as good a performance from me the second time. I'm sorry.
First ring when I'm calling Mackie's phone number. Oh, there she's Skype online. I wait till noon, and if she's not Skype online, then I call.
I mean, the crack of 11 a.m. is pretty oppressive, but...
I was under the impression that she lived in, like, Hawaii or something, and it was, like, 6:30 in the morning for her.
No.
No.
For years, I've been thinking she lived in Hawaii.
Probably because of her name, I guess, or...
The combination of the name and the constant complaints about the morning.
That's pretty amusing, actually.
Oh, aloha, Mackie.
Aloha. How is it from Hawaii having to wake up so early in the morning?
In my case, I can get up, but the laptop doesn't like getting up with me, apparently.
So when you heard the couple of rings, you knew that was me, right?
Yeah. I have a ringtone set, so I know that it's you.
What is it, like, move, bitch, get out the way or something? Or?
No, I put Daft Punk one more time.
Nice.
That's why she just waits for you. That way she can hear the
No,
song.
I can play anytime I want to. Thank you very much.
But she doesn't have to because I play it anytime I want, apparently.
So, apparently.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to PolyCast episode 283 with your host, Daniel Quick.
Civ loves me not.
The Me and Team.
Bringing you extremely expert escapades.
Mad Jin.
It is actually morning here.
Makalua.
Bringing you a laptop that needs to be dropkicked because it can't load Skype fast enough.
And I'm Mega Bears fan, now featuring plus 100% more dysfunctional quarterback.
Oh, man.
Do we need more of those?
Civilization 6. Thread comes to us from Mudblood. Ugh. What districts would players like to see? Personally, I would like to see 1. Another district for water tiles, maybe splitting the military function for the food trade, so there would be 1 district for each. 2. Creating a fortress district separate from the camp with buildings that went something like stockade, fort, castle, that provided a combination of housing and defensive bonuses. 3. Some kind of residential district in the mid-game before neighborhoods for already large cities that will allow a slingshot for tall civs, like a market town district or something. And 4. An intelligence diplomacy district that can only be built in your capital, that houses embassies and such and provides great spy points. I would also like to see the aqueduct made into a more interesting utility district and also a transportation hub of some kind.
Oh, God. Okay. First of all, I would like to see the present districts balanced so that you see more of them, more incentive for variety. They're not too bad, but they could be improved. But some of these, I raise an eyebrow. Like, you don't need to disincentivize harbors further, which is what splitting them into a military and economic component does. Unless you massively buff both of them after doing that, you're just making them weaker.
No, it would mean that you would put the food and trade-based one where in most cities, and then you'd put the actual producing naval unit one in the cities that you want to do that.
You're still effectively nerfing the utility of the district, which I don't think really needs right now.
Not really, it's splitting it.
Well, one of the other things, too, is if you've got a city that just has a lot of water and you don't have room for land districts, then you've got an in for having more water districts. And I'm okay with having more water districts. I mean, one of the suggestions that I put on this topic is going back to the boardwalk district that I'd proposed a long time ago, which was basically, instead of being an economic/military district, it would be more of a culture amenity district along the lines of a combined entertainment district and theater, but on the water, and it'd have things like marinas and maritime museums and aquariums and stuff like that. If you've got water tiles that you're not using, I mean, having more water districts is fine.
Yeah, something like that, or something that makes working water tiles viable in some capacity, sure. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah,
I
you
think
don't just want a copy of all the other districts, but, for water, because, that just doesn't exist. Some people are saying, like, oh, we need an encampment and a commerce center and blah, 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 blah,
Well, okay.
all in water.
Yeah,
Like, no.
training your horses at sea would be a little strange, but
Yeah.
I mean, you could go all out like Coastal Fortress as a district, but I think that would be perfectly suited to being like maybe a building that you can build where, it gives the harbor the ability to bombard naval units or something like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. It's fine. Actually, I'm kind of interested in an implementation of Martello towers. So they'd be a tile improvement. Coastal. Those Martello towers would be able to bombard boats.
I don't know. I think I'd almost prefer it to be part of the district because, again, you run into the problem of for certain coastal cities, there not being enough land tiles to put the districts you need and then also put your bombardment infrastructure.
Yeah. But then you put the city in the wrong spot. So,
well, no, if you go like really hard in the paint on like island maps with high sea level or something, like you can just make the game miserable.
Well, going small islands is non-functional to begin with in Civ 6. So it's just not going to make it any better.
You don't have to leave it like that, though. You could make it workable. Earlier Civ games made it workable. You could do it in Civ 6 if you wanted.
But didn't you know we're unpacking the cities?
Yeah, that's fine. You can make the 1 tile or 2 tile or 3 tile islands viable by unpacking the cities using suggestions similar to this one.
Sure, Guam's just like the superpower out there.
Yeah.
I was wondering how long it would take for Magin to say unstacking cities, and now I know the answer to that question.
Yeah, not very long.
Number 3, some kind of residential district in the mid-game before neighborhoods. I don't see the need for a residential district.
Most districts actually do add housing. So if you've already gotten higher pop, you can just spam out a couple more districts that have buildings which give housing. And that's kind of the benefit.
That one in particular, I'm not sure I like the idea of it because part of the incentive is to invest in the other stuff prior to neighborhoods. And if you have some neighborhood equivalent earlier, I mean, if it's a district, that's its own problem because now you used up a district slot. Maybe, unless you're also just making early neighborhoods that you're going to replace. But either way, you're going to be able to make super huge cities earlier in the game, which is not just a quote-unquote tall move, because wide civs will do it too. And then everybody's going to be running around with like 20-plus pop cities on every civ without exception earlier in the game. Like, I'm not sure that's a good route to go.
Yeah, so far I've been okay with the balance of housing and population for most of the game.
Some cities get a little screwed if you don't mass farm, but the whole point of growing tall is so that you can add more districts, and those districts have more housing so that you can grow taller. So, me.
Also, this kind of thing would make your placement matter less, because housing would effectively become less of a barrier for dry cities.
Yeah.
Well, that too.
And I wouldn't expect to see too many new districts get added in expansions simply because there's not enough room in the cities to use them all and still have workable tiles. There's a lot of suggestions here, like things like castle districts and railroad districts and intelligence districts. And if you're adding stuff like that, you'd probably almost need to expand the actual workable range of a city to 4 and maybe even 5 tiles so that you actually have room for all this stuff.
Or alter district scaling or create tiers of districts. No,
I mean, the fortress district, I mean, it's basically just the camp. He wants to separate it from the camp, so you pull out the defensive buildings and basically put it in there, which is fine. I mean, eventually castles and sort of make sense. Stockades, forts, castles, those were built somewhere else, separate from the city.
I'd say just put those buildings in the encampment, and then just at the late game, they provide a tourism bonus.
My thought line on this before was that the encampment would become a second core of the city, so that it's not just capture the city center, but if there was an encampment there, you'd also have to capture it. And since the encampment already gets all those defensive bonuses from the building the walls and stuff, then there's not really a need for a separate fortress district.
I do like that idea of having to capture the encampment. It even makes more sense to capture that instead of the city center in some situations.
And then, of course, in the late game, you add the airport. So that taking a late game city, you'd have to take out the airport and the city center and the encampment.
Jason, you also brought up someone talking about the railroad district. We're constructing roads thanks to traders. So maybe at some point you reach a certain technology, and then at that particular point, say industrialization, for example, whatever trade routes you have established, if there's already a road there, the next time the trader successfully completes that route, it's upgraded to a railroad. I don't see the need to have some kind of hub or district or building that does that. Just latch on to what we already have.
I've actually been in favor in the past of railroads being separate from actual roads because the utility for them is different. I kind of imagine railroads as working as more like a hub-based thing, kind of similar to airports, where you would load a unit on at a city that's connected to the railroad, and then you can just move it to any other city that is connected to the railroad. So it would basically just be an industrial era airdrop, but you'd have to build the lines and the infrastructure in between the city. And then roads would be a thing you get on, get off at any point.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that for more modern stuff. Maybe not earlier game stuff on the railroad because, bunch of swordsmen sitting on a railway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they can get off and fight pretty quick versus your tanks.
Oh, yeah, no, not a return to like railroads we had in the past. It was like, I can go across the continent in the same turn. Look at me. Yeah, no.
That's more a balance issue, but if you want to make a case for movement, my gosh, like movement in the game in general is scaled weird. So like, there's no realism argument to be had, basically.
Yeah, how about a bus depot district that actually adds a movement bonus back to all your roads?
Yeah.
Okay, we're playing Civ or City Skylines at this point.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just saying, like, units in 50 years, assuming they could live to make them move in the first place, would be able to cover, like, continents.
No, my thought line for railroads to make them useful but not a replacement for roads, because there is a modern road, so there should still be infrastructure for that basic road style. Railroads would connect industrial districts and harbors across your empire, or at least pick a couple districts like that. They would interlink those, and that would make a fair bit more sense, because then the railway network, which would just auto get generated, or maybe even you have to actually build the railroads, would connect the core industrial trade.
Oh, hey, we could give military engineers something to do.
Oh,
No, I'm just kidding. Let's just get rid of those things. They're practically not in the game anyway.
there seems to be a problem with the trade setup that all your strategic resources are global, so you never actually have to move anything to anywhere. And I think it would be much more interesting if you have your iron in this little city and it's an iron mine city, but you need to build swordsmen in that encampment city, so you send a trade route from your iron city to your encampment city.
Yeah, that could be a more interesting use for trade routes, actually having to ship your strategic resources instead of just this arbitrary, oh, you found a second source of it, you can build anything anywhere.
Yep.
I personally think that going away from strategic supply and towards a more Civ 4 kind of approach to strategics was a regression.
You know, you'd have to balance it out so you could always just keep this permanently going until you choose not to. And then once railroads kick in, that's when things are more automated and you need less traders to move things around.
Yeah, reducing the micro would be good.
I do like Mudblood's idea of some kind of diplomacy district, if for no other reason than we're going to tie it into the espionage system so we could actually
districts.
So we could actually start using them a little earlier in the game. I'd be fine with that.
I don't know if you really need a whole district for that, unless you rolled it into a larger bureaucratic or government district that maybe has other functionality.
Something useful.
Like a national mall kind of thing or something like that.
Well, I mean, your city center is a district, so I suppose that could just be tied to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think
Buffing what spies can do until they're Beyond Earth spies or better.
Whee!
Well, let's not go that far.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like the idea of putting some buildings or something in the aqueduct district so that it's not just a
There's
build
something useful there.
Yeah, so you can do something with it. Early, when I first got the game, I kind of thought maybe putting the water mill as a building in the aqueduct district might be kind of cool, but
It'd have to be on the river and yada, yada, yada. I actually think the aqueduct district itself should just get removed and give you a tile improvement.
And I'm okay with it being a district. I mean, because it doesn't count towards your district cost, so it's basically just a free district. Either way, it takes up a whole tile.
It only says you can go one tile away to get water, whereas, say, Roman aqueducts actually went quite the distance.
Or alternatively, it could just be the one district that you build, but then the actual graphic extends to the nearest mountain or river or something like that. As long as it's within the city's workable range or borders, you'd still get it.
In effect, the aqueduct district right now is just an improvement because, you constructed the aqueduct as a district. Okay, we can forget about it now.
Yeah, it's not even fully a district. But that's where things start getting weird because, okay, so now I've got my aqueduct here.
What else can we add to the district?
Yeah, especially...
Sewer, maybe?
Well, no, because the sewer is part of the city, right?
Well, I was just trying to think of things you could add to it to make it more districty as opposed to just, look, here's an aqueduct.
It could be a water district and have things like a desalination plant late in the game that increases growth of the city or increases the food on water tiles, or have like a sewage treatment plant or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, so then that just becomes a building inside the city center, like a watermill or a granary then. We don't need a district.
Yeah. I mean, those don't need to go in the aqueduct. Those can go in the city center.
Sewers themselves as a building doesn't quite make sense since you put it in your city center, but realistically your sewers are, if it's a real city, spread out all over the place. So I'd almost switch it to a tech that, say, gives an extra housing or something to each district.
It's kind of a humorous thought, though. We're in the modern era, and it's like, man, there's only indoor plumbing inside the city district.
Yeah.
How come we not extending that out to the campus and the industrial zone,
Yeah,
the commercial hub? What's with the outhouses still around here?
I'm just imagining a stadium without indoor plumbing.
Right, yeah, that's exactly where I was going, too.
Yeah.
But anyway, the idea of putting more buildings in some of the districts that don't get much use, neighborhoods would also be a good candidate for having some new buildings. Give us back public schools and stuff like that as a building that you build, and then, it upgrades all your neighborhoods and gives you a science boost and stuff like that.
I wouldn't give it a science boost per se. I'd give it something else.
Elsewhere in the thread, UW Habs, and you touched on this already a little bit, Jason. Maybe they could add a new mechanism in the modern era so that, for like corporations, maybe you can put 2 districts on a tile. Stacking districts? No, thank you.
But I thought we were unstacking everything.
Yeah. No, actually, I wouldn't mind splitting up the hexes for improvements. Just cut the hex in half, and then say if you put a farm in both sides, then it gives you double the output. And actual city walls would be you using up, say, half a hex and just putting a wall on it. Then that would give defensive bonuses for any units on the other side of it and prevent people from crossing it.
Also touched upon briefly earlier in this conversation from a post by Tequila75. And that wasn't just an excuse to make that sound, but that was a bonus. I would like the ability to combine 2 districts of the same type that were built next to each other. For example, 2 harbors from 2 cities that were built next to each other could be upgraded to an exotic super harbor seaport, and that's exotic in quotation marks, with some benefits.
Nah.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that suggestion.
No, not really.
I can't really put my finger on why, but
I don't mind the idea, but what does some benefits mean?
Yeah.
to me, that kind of defeats the purpose of the district. That would encourage even more building the districts out on the edge of your city so that they overlap with one another and not building them actually near the city where they're supposed to be. I recently wrote a blog post about some of the frustrations that I've had in the past with virtually every iteration of Civilization with the ways that they implement their different difficulty settings. I basically broke the article down into the 3 things that most annoy me about the way that the difficulty settings are handled. And those 3 things are, number 1, by giving the AIs a lot of free stuff at the beginning of the game, it front loads all of the challenge in a game that's supposed to have very long play sessions. So you're talking a game that's going to be played over the course of days, maybe weeks, maybe even months, but the entire second half of the game feels like a whole lot of just clicking next turn until you get to a victory screen because all the challenge was dealt with in those first, 200 turns. The second problem is the problem of false options, where the AIs have so many bonuses towards certain things that it becomes impractical for the player to pursue certain options or strategies. Because if you try building any wonders in your first city, the AI is just going to warrior archer rush and kill you. So why do we even have the option to build those things? And when you've got like barbarians spawning 4 tiles from your capital and having horse archers and horsemen, can you really justify picking survey instead of discipline? Things like that. And then the third issue is the rapid pacing at which the AIs go through eras. I have seen AIs hit the Renaissance as early as 800 BC, and I pretty consistently see them hit the Renaissance in 400 to 600 BC, even on difficulties like Emperor, and sometimes, but a lot more rare, even on King. A lot of that has to do with the beelining straight to cartography, and England and Norway are particularly egregious at that. Those sorts of things have always frustrated me about the difficulty levels in Civ. And then in the follow-up post a couple days later, I went into some of the ideas that I've had for trying to resolve those. But before we get into ideas for solving them, I'm curious if the rest of this group has similar frustrations or other frustrations with the way that difficulty is handled.
I kind of feel like Phil would probably like to say something about early spawning barbarians right now.
Well, I think that's its own problem, though, because that's, compared to other things, that's trivially fixed. You can either delay the spawn of the barb camps or give a minimum range requirement from spawn location, and either of those things takes care of like 99% of the issue with barbs. So, that's tiny compared to what Mega Bear Stan is talking about here.
I also think that the scouts should be something that the barbarians have to build instead of just given to them when the encampment spawns. I don't think there should be barbarian scouts running around on turn 1.
Well, however you want to tune it. If it's far enough away, then it's still a playable scenario. I don't know. Either way.
It's a question of how long do you want to delay? Do you want to be like, oh, look, turn 1, time to start building units because barbs are right there and they found me? Or do you want it to go, okay, let's at least give you the first 10 turns to at least look around to find out if there's barbs? I'm very much a fan of pushing barbs back and having them in distance from the starting location, just so that they don't jump into mass spam right away, because that's just silly. I'm also a fan of not giving them access to horse units just because there's a horse in the neighborhood.
I mean, the neighborhood is being very generous.
Because you could be very far away. Or, hey, look, the barbs are getting the horses from my horse, which is in my territory.
Nobody on turn 4 has horseback riding yet. So, we don't have the Huns in this game that start with it. So it's ridiculous that the barbarians are out-teching the civs.
Plus, even if you can hold it off, you just lose so much time there.
Yeah, but to be fair, the barb horsemen that spawn early are weak. They are not the actual strong horsemen. Same for the horse archers. They're weak.
True.
Scouts can take them. It's not until people tech up to horseback riding that barbs start spawning out proper horsemen.
True, but
their
the
speed, though, is problematic all the same because of how quickly you get into your land.
That's what I was getting at. It's not just that. I've only got one warrior, maybe an archer at this point. So the horsemen come in, they pillage the stuff or attack me. I attack them, and then they run away and disappear into the fog of war where I can't find them or chase them down. And then they come back with even more of them, including those wounded ones. So it's more of just a numbers thing rather than that the individual horsemen are difficult.
There's better ways to do it, and I would actually consider something barb similar to civs in the fact that they should, say, take land so that their barb camp is the center of their land, and as they explore and as they grow, they would actually expand their borders. And then if you get too close to their borders, that's when they're going to start coming after you. And of course, if they control an area, you can't drop a settler in it, unlike right now where you can.
There were two reasons that I prompted Phil in the barbarian thing. One, because I knew it was a trigger and it would probably be entertaining. But the second reason was quoting from your article here, Jason, and you said it already. The general inability to compete with the AI's economic, technological, and cultural handicaps often shoehorns the player into investing in military at the expense of other areas of development. It is the barbarians specifically that make me, more often than not, invest in military at the expense of other AIs of development, typically not other AI civs. And when it's so soon and so in your face and so detrimental how they can be running around and pillaging, sure, they're not probably going to be able to take the city, but then I'm running around and trying to repair it, but I need units to be able to defend the builders to repair it. Oh, they've moved in again, and now they've quashed my military unit and they've taken the builder. Oh, now I got to construct another builder to improve. Oh, wait, no, I need more military units. And then that becomes the entire game, is you versus the barbs. And then maybe at that point, then an AI proper comes around and says, hey, you look kind of tasty because you spent 30, 40, 50 turns on managing this. Yep.
Right.
And now it's just a snowball effect. You're not going to be able to recover from that, even if all else was being equal. Even if it was just a multiplayer game, human versus human, other than barbs on the map, which is a whole other separate question. So, okay, the human player is not getting, the dirt bonuses that the AI gets, but you've still lost those 20, 30, whatever turns it happens to be to the barbs. And now we combine that with the AI quote-unquote dirt bonuses in a single player or in a multiplayer situation where you have AI. And it's no fun. You're going to want to restart because you're just that far behind.
Right. The barbarians are a very asymmetrical challenge. So putting them right at the beginning of the game like that is going to be unfair to a subset of players. It's not a universal challenge.
Yes, if they're moved back so that they're not just insta-spamming just because this one barb can't spawn right next to this player but not to the other player, then yeah, that's a bit of a problem. But there should be more benefits to dealing with the barbs like that versus not dealing with them. I'm of the opinion it all needs to be rewritten to be a bit more progressive. I do expect barbs to get horse units, but it should be within their zone of control, and so that they can start spamming horses, not, oh, look, there's one on the continent, therefore we can use them.
We need to nerf some of these early game barbarian adjacency, air quotes, bonuses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, one of the suggestions that I had made for trying to fix these problems is to have more options and customizations for the player. So right now we have a nice little checkbox for no barbarians at all. It would be nice to maybe have different settings for how early the barbarians spawn, how aggressive they are, how many barbarians they get, more things to customize the experience so that you're getting something that's more appropriate to your skill level and the style of play that you want to play.
I always found it interesting in Civilization 6, and I always raised an eyebrow. Whatever happened to Raging Barbarians, as an example, that we had in most previous Civ titles? As someone saying, well, no, we've never had anything like that before. There's no precedent for that. Not that that should be the be-end-all and end-all of doing things.
Right.
But I kind of viewed turning on Raging Barbarians as, for example, if you're playing on Emperor difficulty, but you don't feel like you're ready for Immortal, using Civ 6 terminology, then turn on Raging Barbarians. And I always consider that whatever your difficulty level is, plus.
It's like a half step.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a half step. And you've suggested even more possible half steps or even lowering of a step, for example. Like, okay, I've just moved up to this difficulty level. I'd like to ease my way into it. Perhaps I could do slightly less aggressive barbs on this higher difficulty level.
And not only that, but maybe even also having configuration options to adjust the handicaps that are applied to the AIs and even to the players. So have handicaps that improve or reduce your research and growth bonuses and the AIs independently so that you can custom tune it to a point that feels most comfortable to you right now, instead of just having to go up to the next difficulty step where it's just some arbitrary combination of settings that the developers created.
Even with all of this, you're still going to have games that are over before they're over. A lot.
Yeah. True.
Because it's a 4X. And so, like, a small advantage can compound.
Right.
If you're on a losing position and someone has a compounding advantage against you, it's difficult to do anything by yourself. Because if you attack them, then you're going to use more resources than they need to defend themselves, and that's going to put you further behind. But if you don't, then they'll just progressively gain more distance. If you were better than them, then you probably wouldn't be behind at that point unless you got unlucky. One of my thoughts with these 4X games is that there's too much time between when the game is having a runaway emerge and when the game actually ends. Made worse, of course, by the slow gameplay and bad UI. But even if that wasn't a factor in the game, you would still want to actually end the game before it ends. This was the problem in Civ 4, too. Like, you're pushing for culture, you can defend yourself, now hit end turn 60 times. Like, come on.
One of the things that I did like about Civ 4, and it is in my suggestion post here, is I always enjoyed the domination victory that was in Civ 4, where instead of requiring you to kill all the other AIs, you had to own a certain percentage of land and population when the game ended. Or did it just end as soon as you got to that threshold? I don't remember.
You had to trip both thresholds, and they were pretty large, usually over 50% of the world's land and pop.
I think it was like 60% of like land area and like 40% of pop or something like that.
It depended on the number of civs.
But I kind of like the direction that victory went, where it didn't force you into these very rigid, you must kill everybody, you must do nothing but science, you must do nothing but tourism types of victories. It allowed you to more organically develop your empire. If you felt like you needed to conquer another civ right now because they're threatening to you, you could do that. And just conquering one civ didn't mean that you were forced into trying to have to conquer everyone else because now you've got crazy warmonger hate against you and no one else will trade with you or do diplomacy with you.
That's separate from the domination victory, though, because that's a function of the AI's algorithms in Civ 5 and 6. The AI's algorithms in Civ 4, they did not care. Warmonger was not really a thing. What you got was either a -2 for declaring war on a friend, or I think maybe it was a -1, and then like another permanent one for declaring on the target directly.
Right,
so there was many situations like with AIs that were cautious or less towards each other where you could straight up declare war 10 times on that target. take their cities and burn them, nobody else in the world would flinch. They wouldn't give a crap at all. No diplomatic demerit whatsoever in Civ 4. So because of that, yes, taking somebody out did not result in having to go down the military path. The other issue with the newer games, and also really with Civ 4 and before, really with every Civ game ever, is how the mechanics are balanced. The military victory is dominant. Winning any of the other victory conditions requires you to defend yourself. And once you start involving nukes, science victories really aren't viable because you can just get nuked. And if you can just get nuked, it's a lot less resource intensive to just nuke the hell out of the other people first so they don't nuke you. And at that point, you might as well win Conquest or Dom. I mean, sure, you could then build a spaceship while everyone is a smoldering ash pile, but you might as well just go in.
I mean, I certainly like the change brought about in Brave New World and Civilization 5 and then Civilization 6, where a culture victory is more direct and more aggressive, in the Civ 6 context. Man, need tourists. Got to get more tourists than everyone else. Not just about defending against someone else's culture, but being able to go on the offensive. But I think for the domination, what we had in Civilization 4 has been described. Plus, you also mentioned, for example, permanent alliances.
Yes.
Returning to that would be very helpful. Certainly, you must capture all opponent capitals is better than you must take out every last single frickin' city in order to win a domination victory.
Oh gosh, yes.
Besides now, the warmonger thing, where as you said, Phil, in Civilization 4 it was there, but it was
pretty limited.
It was pretty insignificant, and now we've gone the other extreme. Besides the fact that we need to kind of thread the needle back to somewhere in the center between those two things, if you had ways of going towards a domination victory, like population percentage, for example, then you could lessen those warmonger penalties and still be pushing on domination, because domination can take multiple forms. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from taking out all of the AI capitals or taking out all of the cities as well. But yes, it is nice to have something other than the one particular form of domination, although indeed, yes, to a degree you are being dragged into some kind of domination, but domination should not necessarily be exclusively or even primarily military.
Right, and having more options for victory conditions and giving you the option to enable and disable the ones that you like or don't like, I think is also a way to alleviate some of that pressure of feeling like you're forced to do things because of the conditions of the game.
They don't really mean anything, though, unless the military tuning is very different.
The Era Rush, though.
Stop giving him free settlers. How about that one?
I'm fine with the free settler. I'm not fine with the free settler getting dropped exactly 4 tiles away from the capital because it doesn't stop to go, I wonder if I should put this somewhere else. I'm fine with them getting an extra city. That's fine. That actually on high difficulty level means that you have somebody who's going to be better prepared against just a silly rush that you can do on Prince. But getting 4 Eurekas on Deity and 4 inspirations, that is the literal reason why they just plow through the tech tree and the civic tree. They can start with the Eureka for it, and therefore they don't need to go find a natural wonder because it's already handed to them, and therefore that was easy. It's also why they get up to cartography fast, because they don't necessarily need to worry about getting Eurekas along the way. So they're effectively going at half the science cost per tech.
And not doing any of the work to earn that discount.
Yeah. Especially, and also because the tech tree is just one giant beeline, that really skews the whole thing.
And I think, as Matt was pointing out about the second settler on Emperor hard difficulty for Civ 6, and it's like, maybe you should think about where you're placing this city. There might be somewhere better, which I think ties well to your point about the front-loading of frustration, Jason, where it's, they're putting cities so close together they can't fit enough districts in. And what we were also talking about before about planning ahead. When you talk about it being impractical for the human player to compete for early game wonders, we've already kind of talked about that. Ones you might get lucky because, the AI doesn't have a suitable location in order to construct that, which could also include, they would have a suitable location, but it's not inside their border yet, and they don't know that it would be advantageous for them to go ahead and do that. So, maybe I can go ahead and get that.
But the fact that they do start with 3 cities pretty much on turn 1 or 2 means that they've got a lot more stuff in their borders to meet those wonder prerequisites.
It's true.
Yeah, except the problem is that they don't move those stupid settlers.
So they may not have the production in order to be able to capitalize on what should be that advantage.
And that leads into one of the other problems that I brought up here in the Era Rush section, which is that sometimes all these front-loaded bonuses don't actually make the AI play better in the long run. beelining through the tech tree can actually hurt you because it's forcing your units and your infrastructure to all be more expensive. And so I've seen games where the AI is in the modern era and they're still running around with crossbows because A, they don't upgrade them, and B, they don't have the production to build any of the new stuff that they've unlocked. And even the cheaper stuff now, in the case of districts, is more expensive for them.
No, they will upgrade the units. It's just the problem is getting new units is really expensive. Like in my England LP, I went naval map, and a couple of them went straight to cartography, and sure, they had a handful of caravels when they got there because they were able to upgrade. But once those caravels were dead, the cost to build a new caravel was way higher than they were able to do it.
And cartography does obsolete the galley, right? So you can't build new galleys. They could still build quadremes, but they probably don't want to because the way that the AI flavoring works, they probably are just like, oh, I need more naval units. What's the best naval unit I can build? Caravel.
Yep.
Even though it's going to take 60 turns.
Yep.
As for the point about it being impractical for the human player to get early great people, I would say, first off, which early great people are we talking about? I mean, if it's a great prophet, yeah, okay, they got Stonehenge, well, whatever. And that's a whole separate concern. Like when it comes to a great prophet, for example, we've talked about religion in Civ 6 before, and some general concerns we have about, is it really worth the effort more often than not? However, if we combine this with, the AI really didn't settle these cities very well, and they're really clustered together, and they're not putting down the districts they should be putting down, or they're putting the districts down and they're not getting the adjacency bonus they should have, plus they don't have the production to be able to turn out those districts as quickly as they should. Getting early great people, if I'm focusing, for example, say on great scientists and great merchants, now I'm speaking up to and including on Immortal here, maybe on deity it's suddenly that much more dramatic, but I don't find it impractical to compete for early great people.
It depends on what great people, like Commerce District. Holy crap, if there's Congo in the game, screw you. You got nothing. Commerce-wise, yeah, you're going to be fighting if everybody puts down the Commerce District. Industrial-wise, yeah, you're probably not going to get there first on higher level, and so others will start picking it up first. Religion, yeah, that's a big fight. Even on deity, you can get the third or fourth religion, and that's really where you want to aim for, usually fourth. Great generals, you can probably get. It just depends on who's in the game.
It's pretty difficult to get two classical great generals against the deity AI. I've never managed to do that, but I haven't really tried either.
They're going to be at the medieval or Renaissance era level after the first one, so, you know.
Yeah, but if you push for it, you can usually get that first classical era one.
Yeah, well, just like anything, if you push, you can get one. It just depends on who else is in the game. Say Chimera starts with multiple cities and she slaps down a bunch of encampments because she got to runs working before you because she got all those Eurekas for it. You're not getting it. Stuff like that can.
Although I find she tends not to. I was able to get a general on her as Norway, so.
I wouldn't say it's impractical for the early grade people. It's inconsistent for the early grade people.
If Russia's
it depends
in the game,
very much on who's in the game. I mean, if Greece is in the game and they're building their fancy pants theater districts, then even the writers and artists might become hard for the player to get just because they're building that district so early in the game and everybody else's great people get expensive. Great people isn't as bad as the inability to get wonders, but it's still a problem that nags me a lot of times.
Speaking of not being able to get to early game wonders, speaking of dragged into domination, I'm just going to take it. Screw you, because I couldn't build it.
Right, and again, that just forces you into, having to play militarily, because now you've got to conquer everybody's stuff because their stuff's better than your stuff, and it's always going to be better because you can't possibly build cities as good as their cities as quickly as they build them.
Well, as quickly. You can build better cities than they can, pretty easily.
In the long term, right. But again, the problem is that all that challenge is front-loaded, and once you do start conquering people, the rest of the game just becomes an exercise in hitting next turn. Pretty much the only time I ever have a challenge with an AI on the harder difficulties late game is if it's a continent's map and there's one AI on the other continent that just steamrolled over the whole thing. Like the point you mentioned earlier where you get to cartography and there's a continent full of nothing but barbs. Well, in this case, it's you get to cartography and there's a continent full of nothing but Alexander.
I'd rather see the tech and civic Eurekas just disappear. I think that causes more problems than it's worth. And I'd like to see the science from pop get cut down to the same as culture side, so 0.3 per pop. And then if you want to give a handicap bonus to the AI, you can give it 0.1 per difficulty level above Emperor so that they would get a little bit more per pop, which would still let them get through the tech tree a little faster, but it wouldn't be two different tech trees being played at the same time.
And Jason, in your second article in addressing these issues, when I first saw the term rubber banding, I thought, oh, trigger. Oh, no. Oh, no. But then when you started to describe it, I thought, okay, that's not where I thought you were going. Where you say that instead of the difficulty setting providing handicaps from turn 1, each civ would start out in parity, and handicaps would be dynamically applied as the game progresses and certain civs get ahead of the pack and fall behind, quote-unquote. So I take it that is tying to, for example, what the AI is or is not doing. Like, for example, if you want the Rika to research the sailing civic, then you need to take the in-game action of settling a city on the coast. So these dynamic applications are based on what civs do or do not do in that respect? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of like that, where if a civ is falling behind in one particular area of the game, like culture or science or stuff like that, give them a little boost towards those things to help them catch up. And if civs are getting way ahead in those same things, maybe nerf it a little bit so that over the course of the game, the challenge is more evenly distributed. And I know that rubber banding is going to be a very controversial thing. But as long as you have options, obviously you would want to disable that for competitive multiplayer. Yeah. But for a single player game, if I've got the option to do that so that the AIs at the end of the game can become competitive, then maybe I want to do that. And I don't see any reason why the player can't have the option to do that, assuming that it's not a prohibitively difficult thing to implement from a technical standpoint.
Well,
that just sounds bad.
To me, as long as the rubber banding is more about you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink it. It's not like I'm not just going to hand this to you because you've fallen behind, but hey, if you take this action now and you execute it properly in various stages, you chunk it over the next 10, 15, 20 turns, then you're going to put yourself in a better position to be able to deal with whoever is dominating in this particular output. Say culture, for example.
Right.
Then that's fine. I don't know exactly off the top of my head how that would look like mechanic-wise, but as long as it's not a handout, I don't want handouts. That's what I see when I see rubber banding. I don't want a handout or a takeaway.
Like what you said earlier with going back to the Eurekas, is maybe you've got a mechanic where if you're a certain number of eras behind, your Eurekas become a higher percentage of the tech cost. If you're 2 eras behind the most advanced civ in the game, maybe your Eurekas are 75% instead of 50%. And if you're 2 eras ahead, maybe they go down to 25. You can do things like that as well, where it's still the proactive element of you have to go out and do the Eureka. And I'm just kind of brainstorming ad hoc right now. I'm not saying
I would really rather just have a mechanism to end a game that somebody's winning rather than rubber banding people back into it.
Yeah.
Just end the game and start a new game.
Me like, oh, I suck at teching. I really don't know what I'm doing. Oh, all of a sudden my people are really, really smart because somebody on the other side of the world actually figured this out. Like what?
Yeah,
no.
Civ 4 had a diffusion mechanic. That was fine. It was very minimal, but
that's
like
different though. That's very different than what was being proposed.
Yeah,
and very different than rubber banding. I'm actually okay with if we can actually enhance the Eureka mechanic to be more dynamic. I would be okay with, say, somebody went and did sailing. You didn't. You have no water whatsoever. So that AI has boats. It's got harbors. It's got fishing boats. If you send a trader to that city, the trader is going to look and go, crap floats on water. Didn't know that. And they're going to bring it back to you. And so maybe you get a little bump towards that tech.
Diffusion mechanics are definitely the more ideal approach to take for this sort of thing.
There's a near literal application of leading a horse to water.
Yeah.
But not making them drink it.
But I would do that for all the techs and all the civics. So if you see somebody, say, who's a theocracy, doing diplomatic actions with them, you'll learn more about being a theocracy just by talking to them. Instead of needing to have founded a religion, the religious side is the one that annoys me the most, where if you don't found a religion, there's like a whole series of civics that you just can't get because they're all religious based.
What really bothers me about that one is that includes 2 of the medieval governments.
Yeah.
Or put another 4th government in there that would be on like the economic branch or the culture branch or something.
I'm okay with theocracy being on the religious branch, but monarchy itself maybe a little less.
Right, monarchy could maybe move.
But my point is there should be, say, alternate Eureka styles or different ways to improve. Like if you go somebody and you see a bank and you barely have market, your trader pops in or you send spies in or you even just trade with them in general. It's like, okay, what's the bank for? It's for this. We should look into that. And you get a little bit of diffusion or somebody builds a wonder that's related to a tech.
Yep.
if you go see that wonder, that should help you towards that tech.
Yep, I agree.
So it's a bit of diffusion, but it's not a, wow, somebody on the other side of the planet figured this out. And I don't know them, but all of a sudden I'm really good at doing this old tech. Or the other way, because you did bring it up. Oh, I'm the tech leader because we're really smart. Oh, all of a sudden we get really dumb because, well, everybody else is stupid.
And in fact, the ideas that you proposed for Eureka, spoiler alert, I actually do have a draft of another blog post where I talk about an almost identical thing.
If you're fighting a war against somebody, they have muskets, you don't, because you don't know what gunpowder is. Every time you kill one of their units, you should get a chunk of the gunpowder tech. Even if you're not close enough, even if you're like a couple techs back from being able to learn about it, you should be getting bit by bit, learning by doing.
Yeah, there could be a lot of trickle mechanics where, like, even if you have trade routes with other civs that have out-teched you, maybe each turn you get a couple points towards that Eureka bonus, or you're killing units that are more advanced, you get a couple points towards those Eureka bonuses, and then maybe it could even cap at the 50%, like you got the Eureka, and then you have to do the other 50% on your own. So you get to leech half of a tech from other civs, but you have to research half of it yourself.
I'm also a fan of redoing the Eureka mechanic, so it's not always half. I think great scientists or those who give Eureka bonuses should get 60 to 70%, and spies should get some lower amount based on their level, and then people who leech get less as well.
Right.
I think that Eureka mechanic can also be expanded to different amounts.
Or again, if you've got 2 or 3 Eurekas associated with each technology and civic, then you could even have a thing where each of those gives you like 20% towards the Eureka. So you do one of them, you get a little bit. If you do all of them, you get the whole half.
Or more, depending on what it is.
Right, whatever the percentages that you decide to do. But yeah, I can see stuff like that working as well.
Or even, for example, hey, I'm sending you a trade route. How about open borders? Oh, thank you. So now, for example, it makes that trade a little easier, so maybe I get a little bit more gold, maybe I get a little bit more culture, or I actually get some culture from that now. As an example, just as a recognition of, you can go ahead and send the trade route and don't have to have open borders. That's fine. But if you do take that action, then you're going to get that little bit of edge.
Yeah, or how you get science and culture from sending it to a foreign city based on their districts, that you could directly apply that science and culture that you would get from that trade route to the techs that are based in that city.
Right, like every turn you get 1 point towards the Eureka of whatever text maybe they have that you don't, or whatever text that unlocks the districts that they've built.
Instead of just a pure culture to apply anywhere, you would actually just get that from the trade route rather than...
Right, it could be both too, just small amounts of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then you would start going, wow, why am I going here? Also, trade diffusion. If you have a trade capital and everybody's sending trade routes to the same city, then you have trade diffusion for certain types of techs, like that great authoritarian regime that's sending trade routes to the democratic city-state or whatever. You can learn about different people, and just by having a trade center where multiple civs are sending trade routes to, then there can be a diffusion through that side as well. There's lots of different ways to help do that.
And there were a couple of other things from your frustrations article, and under the front loading of frustration there, Jason, that we haven't talked about yet, and I read that and I thought, oh yes, but, and then also again, oh yes, but. I already talked about the AI on cities and putting them so close together and the district squishing. AI on offense. Quote, the AI still can't plan or execute a city siege, as it's generally inept at handling the 1 unit per tile hex-based comment, and they rarely bother to escort their civilian units, unquote. Yes, and I would append with the civilian unit, although it's been better since the game first came out. But, my gosh, these civilian units, particularly the settlers, they have such a narrow focus. It's, I am going to settle here, and if you beat them to that point, not only do they not try to find somewhere else to go, but they just sit there.
Yeah.
And they sit there, and they sit there, and it's like,
yep.
Can you do something other than make me want to drag myself down domination, at least dominating this settler and capturing it? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, man, you just gotta guide them. You gotta help them settle.
Yeah, I'll help you settle for me.
Yeah. I'll just settle it for you.
Although even more so, I had a reaction to the AIs on defense. Quote, AI cities can usually easily be captured by the human player, unquote. Yes, that front-loading of frustration early on in the game, but there's at a certain point in the game where, oh, look at your military strength. It's so cute, it's practically a negative number. Oh, look at your city strength. I'm sorry, it's 90? 100? because you were able to push through the tech tree, you managed to get those city defenses, you managed to construct one unit in that era, and now you've boosted the city strength, and now it's a whole bunch of, well, it's going to be 15, 20 turns, the game really has come to an end, but it hasn't really come to an end, so I can get these city defenses, which takes more time and effort than, in most cases, having this huge carpet of doom on the map, although I will say, as a separate aside, if you can be accessed by battleships and or by bombers, those things slice through those defenses way too easily. But short of those situations, either because I can't quite hit it with a battleship, or I'm not quite to the point of bombers, the cities being captured, it actually kind of flips from being too easy to way too difficult, and why am I just hitting end turn? This sucks.
Well, that's because there's free walls. The best walls in the game are free. You just have to get to a certain civil engineering, and then just instant free walls for everybody, including after you capture the city. It actually ruins the combat mechanic because, hey, look, I just took your city and instant free walls. Have fun trying to take it back, jerk.
And as for the battleships and bombers, I'm okay with them being really powerful because, the counter is you should build a navy and build an air force to defend yourself. And right now the AI is very bad at doing both of those things.
Yeah. If you actually had an air force, then bombers aren't really a problem.
Yeah, this isn't Beyond Earth where there's only one air unit in the entire game. And all of them are either bombers or fighters.
Well, I don't mind them being strong, but just in some cases, especially when compared to how else you're going to be able to try to bombard that city, when there's nothing else there, it's like, oh, I could move a siege unit, but no, I could just have a bomber, and 4 bombers are going to wipe those defenses in a single turn. This is a bit too much.
Yeah, there can definitely be some changes in balance. But again, I think the big thing is the AI needs to build its own dang air force.
Yeah, if there was a fighter or two up in that zone, your bombers wouldn't be wiping out the city in one turn. They'd all be dying. Or there could be this thing called anti-aircraft gun. Could build one of those.
It's just kind of like, okay, your military strength is 0, but it's not exactly 0 now, is it? Because you have these very, very nice defenses for the era, and you're that much farther ahead of me. I mean, which is good in some respects, because I understand, I want them to be able to defend themselves, but it just seems to be such an extreme from earlier on in the game when it's so easy to take cities, and now it's just a slogfest. It's like, okay, you just want to call this? I'm just going to call this.
And defense is always something that should have to be an investment, not something that you just get for free because you tech to some arbitrary tech.
Yep.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's also why no one uses Renaissance walls, because it's actually faster and easier to get better than Renaissance era walls by doing the civic side.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, unless I have that one city-state that lets me buy walls with faith, I don't even bother, in most games, upgrading to medieval walls.
Oh, even if I don't have it, I don't bother upgrading to medieval walls. It's just not worth the effort.
Unless that city is particularly threatened. But yeah, in most cases, I don't.
Well, if it's threatened, I put units near it. And the units do more than the walls. Hence, also going back to my idea of, hey, that encampment needs to also be taken on top of the city center. And if you start doing that, especially with an airport, then taking cities, yes, becomes a bit more of a slug, but it becomes more of an important slug.
You also talk about in your second article about a drop-down menu for choosing your own start bias as a human player, or that they could even apply to the AI. I guess the only air quotes difficulty with that would be is if you're, as you say, acknowledge some start biases are civ specific. Particularly in the case of the AI, I wouldn't want that to be random if the if the start bias is tied to the civ. It's like, hey, I'm Russia and I've got this boost for tundra. I'm in jungle. Oh,
right. Well,
Golly gee willikers.
The default should always be the civ-specific start biases. I was just talking about that as an option in case you want to create specific scenarios to get a specific challenge where you want to be Congo in a desert start just to make the game harder for you for some reason.
Oh, so it's difficulty level plus then again.
Yeah, that's a little further than I'd go. I mean, I'm all for, if they want to change it so that you can individually change the difficulty level per player / AI in the game, that makes total sense because it's not like every other game does that. Let alone in multiplayer, you can do that.
Indeed.
So if you can do that, well, yeah, single player, yeah, you can go, okay, well, the German AI, yeah, let's throw them up on deity because they're really strong. Not really interested in doing a full-on deity game, so we'll put these other ones down at, say, immortal or whatever. And then you can adjust to see which ones grow bigger or not.
The point of the article is, I think the more options the game gives to the player, the better.
Yeah.
And to answer your question from the second article, and I think you raised this already, Jason, near the start of this conversation of your articles. No, it's not too late for Civ 6. There's no reason to talk about Civ 7. What is this nonsense?
Now we're going to have to talk about Civ 10 now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Or we skip a few, like Windows.
Well, we have said before, there's too much pressure to do the next Civ, so we should do the next Civ, and then there won't be so much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything that is infeasible or impossible to do in Civ 6, then I hope that they at least consider them for future games instead of just continuing to do the same thing that they've done always.
There is still no estimated time of arrival for PC, Mac, and Linux cross-platform Civilization 6 MP. Updated on the 25th of May, Aspire, the company behind the ports for the Mac and Linux version of Civilization 6, says, yeah, we don't have one yet. Quote, while we understand that this feature is super important to the Civilization 6 experience, we cannot update the game without coordination with 2K to ensure that experience is seamless, unquote. To which I say, if you're waiting for a seamless experience, then this is never, ever going to happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, on Reddit, someone said, this statement that there's no ETA is outdated and inaccurate, to which they point to a Steam user who goes by Aspire Woo, that's W-O-O, not W-U.
Woo!
Quote, because implementation and dev work has to be done on all versions, the natural target is the next DLC, which should hit around July, unquote. To which there's two things here, which is the immediate response. That is not an official statement.
Yeah.
That is speculation, as was then drilled down in subsequent conversation, which was, this is our wish list. We would very much like it to be done, if for no other reason, so then you can stop bugging us about why it's not done. Then there's also the natural target is the next DLC, which should hit around July. Wait, what?
Yeah.
The natural target is release of vanilla.
And whoever posted that is now a natural target of 2K for talking about when the next DLC is coming. You asshat.
Well, yes.
You created a news item all your own. Well done, sir.
Well, thank you.
Also, you're fired.
Yeah.
Support the ongoing PolyCast Patreon campaign.
Collective achievements.
Personal incentives.
Month-to-month commitment.
For more information, visit thepolycast.net/Patreon.
Call in today.
In North America, 301-637-7659.
In Europe, 44121-288-7659.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
Log on to the series' official website at
thepolycast.net.
And the disabling of victory conditions, I don't think the AI really knows about that still.
No. Yeah, I don't think so either.
I wish it did.
We're going to build all these theater districts and stuff, but it doesn't realize Dan has culture victory turned off.
Which always made it humorous initially in Civilization 5 as an aside. Remember that, hey, you're trying to win the game like I am. You don't even know how to win the game. Shut up.
I like how it can somehow tell super early, too.
Yep. Oh, exactly.
You're going for the same victory condition on turn 3. Is that so?
Yes, I built a city, therefore I am intent to win the game.
Or in Civ 4, hey, you're a warmonger. You took out this Civ. You never met that Civ. What? How do you know about this?
Why do you care that I kicked their face then?
Yep.
Cue Rocket Man.
I don't think we have the money to pay the royalties for that.
Nope. Speaking of cues...
Yeah, would you like to rock it out of here now?
I'm Rocket Man.
Yes, be quiet. Mackie's going to do something to us. Continue, Mackie.
Wait
what?
for it. Wait for it.
What, the Mackie sigh? There we go.
So this has been episode 283 of PolyCast. I'm Makalu, who sometimes really doesn't know why she's still here. And with me as usual, Dan Quick.
There's levels to this game, and we keep on climbing up.
Yeah, I think you're going on a downward spiral. Mad Jen.
It's a downward slide.
Possibly.
Slide spiral.
The Mean Team.
Just got to attach the right warhead on that rocket.
You can't see the face I'm making. And our guest, Mega Bears fan.
Hey, I really like the kids in the hall.
Squish your head.
I'm crushing your head.
I mean, I was talking about nukes. I don't know what you guys were talking about.
Record date June 10th, 2017. Civilization 4, 5, and Beyond Earth sound clips copyright Take-Two Interactive.
Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.